Chapter 23. The business of arranging for this sudden departure was really not so difficult as it first appeared. Jenny proposed to tell her mother the whole truth, and there was nothing to say to her father except that she was going with Miss Bracebridge at the latter's request. He might question her, but he really could not doubt. Before going home that afternoon, she accompanied Lester to a department store where she was fitted out with a trunk, a suitcase, and a traveling suit and hat. Lester was very proud of his prize. "When we get to New York, I'm going to get you some real things," he told her. "I'm going to show you what you can be made to look like." He had all the purchased articles packed in the trunk and sent to his hotel. Then he arranged to have Jenny come there and dress Monday for the trip, which began in the afternoon. When she came home, Mrs. Gerhardt, who was in the kitchen, received her with her usual affectionate greeting. "Have you been working very hard?" she asked. "You look tired." "No," she said, "I'm not tired. It isn't that, I just don't feel good." "What's the trouble?" "Oh, I have to tell you something, Mama. It's so hard." She paused, looking inquiringly at her mother, and then away. "Why, what is it?" asked her mother nervously. So many things had happened in the past that she was always on the alert for some new calamity. "You haven't lost your place, have you?" "No," replied Jenny, with an effort to maintain her mental poise. "But I'm going to leave it." "No!" exclaimed her mother. "Why?" "I'm going to New York." Her mother's eyes opened widely. "Why? When did you decide to do that?" she inquired. "Today." "You don't mean it." "Yes, I do, Mama. Listen, I've got something I want to tell you. You know how poor we are. There isn't any way we can make things come out right. I have found someone who wants to help us. He says he loves me, and he wants me to go to New York with him Monday. I've decided to go." "Oh, Jenny!" exclaimed her mother. "Surely not. You wouldn't do anything like that after all that's happened. Think of your father." "I've thought it all out," went on Jenny firmly. "It's really for the best. He's a good man, I know he is. He has lots of money. He wants me to go with him, and I better go. He will take a new house for us when we come back and help us to get along. No one will ever have me as a wife. You know that. It might as well be this way. He loves me, and I love him. Why shouldn't I go?" "Does he know about Vesta?" asked her mother cautiously. "No," said Jenny guiltily. "I thought I'd better not tell him about her. She oughtn't to be brought into it if I can help it." "I'm afraid you're storing up trouble for yourself, Jenny," said her mother. "Don't you think he is sure to find it out sometime?" "I thought maybe that she could be kept here," suggested Jenny, "until she's old enough to go to school. Then maybe I could send her somewhere." "She might," assented her mother, "but don't you think it would be better to tell him now? He won't think any the worse of you." "It isn't that. It's her," said Jenny passionately. "I don't want her to be brought into it." Her mother shook her head. "Where did you meet him?" she inquired. "At Mrs. Bracebridge's." "How long ago?" "Oh, it's been almost 2 months now." "And you never said anything about him?" protested Mrs. Gerhardt reproachfully. "I didn't know that he cared for me this way," said Jenny defensively. "Why didn't you wait and let him come out here first?" asked her mother. "It'll make things so much easier. You can't go and not have your father find out." "I thought I'd say I was going with Mrs. Bracebridge. Papa can't object to my going with her." "No," agreed her mother thoughtfully. The two of them looked at each other in silence. Mrs. Gerhardt, with her imaginative nature, endeavored to formulate some picture of this new and wonderful personality that had come into Jenny's life. He was wealthy. He wanted to take Jenny. He wanted to give them a good home. What a story! "And he gave me this," put in Jenny, who with some instinctive psychic faculty had been following her mother's mood. She opened her dress at the neck and took out the $250. She placed the money in her mother's hands. The latter stared at it wide-eyed. Here was the relief for all her woes. Food, clothes, rent, coal, all done up in one small package of green and yellow bills. If there were plenty of money in the house, Gerhardt need not worry about his burned hands. George and Martha and Veronica could be clothed in comfort and made happy. Jennie could dress better. There would be a furniture education for Vesta. There would be a future education for Vesta. "Do you think he might ever want to marry you?" asked her mother finally. "I don't know," replied Jennie. "He might. I know he loves me." "Well," said her mother after a long pause, "if you're going to tell your father, you better do it right away. He'll think it's strange as it is." Jennie realized that she had won. Her mother had acquiesced from sheer force of circumstances. She was sorry, but somehow it seemed to be for the best. "I'll help you out with it," her mother had concluded with a little sigh. The difficulty of telling this lie was very great for Mrs. Gerhardt, but she went through the falsehood with seeing nonchalance which allayed Gerhardt's suspicions. The children were also told, and when, after the general discussion, Jennie repeated the falsehood to her father, it seemed natural enough. "How long do you think you'll be gone?" he inquired. "About 2 or 3 weeks," she replied. "That's a nice trip," he said. "I came through New York in 1844. It was a small place then compared to what it is now." Secretly, he was pleased that Jennie should have this fine chance. Her employer must like her. When Monday came, Jennie bade her parents goodbye and left early, going straight to the Dorton, where Lester awaited her. "So you came," he said gaily, greeting her as she entered the ladies' parlor. "Yes," she said simply. "You are my niece," he went on. "I have engaged H room for you near mine. I'll call for the key and you go dress. When you're ready, I'll have the trunk sent to the depot. The train leaves at 1 o'clock." She went to her room and dressed while he fidgeted about, read, smoked, and finally knocked at the door. She replied by opening to him fully clad. "You look charming," he said with a smile. She looked down, for she was nervous and distraught. The whole process of planning, lying, nerving herself to carry out her part had been hard on her. She looked tired and worried. "Not grieving, are you?" he asked, seeing how things stood. "No," she replied. "Come now, sweet, you mustn't feel this way. It's coming out all right." He took her in his arms and kissed her, and they strolled down the hall. He was astonished to see how well she looked even in these simple clothes, the best she had ever had. They reached the depot after a short carriage ride. The accommodations had been arranged for beforehand, and Kane had allowed just enough time to make the train. When they settled themselves in a Pullman stateroom, it was with a keen sense of satisfaction on his part. Life looked rosy. Jennie was beside him. He had succeeded in what he had started out to do. So might it always be. As the train rolled out of the depot and the long reaches of the field Jennie studied them wistfully. There were the forests, leafless and bare, the wide brown fields wet with the rains of winter, the low farmhouses sitting amid flat stretches of prairie, their low roofs making them look as if they were hugging the ground. The train roared past little hamlets with cottages of white and yellow and drab, their roofs blackened by frost and rain. Jennie noted one in particular which seemed to recall the old neighborhood where they used to live at Columbus. She put her handkerchief to her eyes and began silently to cry. "I hope you're not crying, are you, Jennie?" said Lester, looking up suddenly from the letter he had been reading. Come, come, he went on as if he saw a faint tremor shaking her. This won't do. You have to do better than this. You'll never get along if you act that way. She made no reply, and the depth of her silent grief filled him with strange sympathies. Don't cry, he continued soothingly. Everything will be all right, I told you that. You needn't worry about anything. Jennie made a great effort to recover herself and began to dry her eyes. You don't want to give way like that, he continued. It doesn't do you any good. I know how you feel about leaving home, but tears won't help any. It isn't as if you were going away for good, you know. Besides, you'll be going back shortly. You care for me, don't you, sweet? I'm something? Yes, she said, and managed to smile back at him. Lester returned to his correspondence, and Jennie fell to thinking of Vesta. It troubled her to realize that she was keeping this secret from one who was already very dear to her. She knew that she ought to tell Lester about the child, but she shrank from the painful necessity. Perhaps later on she might find the courage to do it. I have to tell him something, she thought, with a sudden upwelling of feeling as regarded the seriousness of this duty. If I don't do it soon, and I should go and live with him and he should find it out, he would never forgive me. He might turn me out, and then where would I go? I have no home now. What would I do with Vesta? She turned to contemplate him, a premonitory wave of terror sweeping over her. But she only saw that imposing and comfort-loving soul quietly reading his letters, his smoothly shaved red cheek and comfortable head and body looking anything but militant or like an avenging nemesis. She was just withdrawing her gaze when he looked up. Well, have you washed all your sins away? He inquired merrily. She smiled faintly at the allusion. The touch of fact in it made it slightly piquant. I expect so, she replied. He turned to some other topic while she looked out of the window, the realization that one impulse to tell him had proved unavailing, dwelling in her mind. I'll have to do it shortly, she thought, and consoled herself with the idea that she would surely find courage before long. Their arrival in New York the next day raised the important question in Lester's mind as to where he should stop. New York was a very large place, and he was not in much danger of encountering people who would know him, but he thought it just as well not to take chances. Accordingly, he had the cabman drive them to one of the more exclusive apartment hotels, where he engaged a suite of rooms, and they settled themselves for a stay of 2 or 3 weeks. This atmosphere into which Jennie was now plunged was so wonderful, so illuminating, that she could scarcely believe this was the same world that she had inhabited before. Cain was no lover of vulgar display. The appointments with which he surrounded himself were always simple and elegant. He knew at a glance what Jennie needed, and bought for her with discrimination and care. And Jennie, a woman, took a keen pleasure in the handsome gowns and pretty fripperies that he lavished upon her. Could this be really Jennie Gerhardt, the washerwoman's daughter? She asked herself as she gazed in her mirror at the figure of a girl clad in blue velvet, with yellow French lace at her throat and upon her arms. Could these be her feet, clad in soft, shapely shoes at $10 a pair? These her hands, adorned with flashing jewels? What wonderful good fortune she was enjoying. And Lester had promised that her mother would share in it. Tears sprang to her eyes at the thought. The dear mother, how she loved her. It was Lester's pleasure in these days to see what he could do to make her look like someone truly worthy of him. He exercised his most careful judgment, and the results surprised even himself. People turned in the halls, in the dining rooms, and on the street to gaze at Jennie. A stunning woman that man has with him, was a frequent comment. Despite her altered state, Jenny did not lose her judgment of life or her sense of perspective or proportion. She felt as though life were tentatively loaning her something which could be taken away after a time. There was no pretty vanity in her bosom. Lester realized this as he watched her. "You're a big woman, in your way," he said. "You'll amount to something. Life hasn't given you much of a deal up to now." He wondered how he could justify this new relationship to his family, should they chance to hear about it. If he should decide to take a home in Chicago or St. Louis, there was such a thought running in his mind, could he maintain it secretly? Did he want to? He was half persuaded that he really, truly loved her. As the time drew near for their return, he began to counsel her as to her future course of action. "You ought to find some way of introducing me as an acquaintance to your father," he said. "It will ease up matters. I think I'll call. Then if you tell him you're going to marry me, he'll think nothing of it." Jenny thought of Vesta and trembled inwardly. But perhaps her father could be induced to remain silent. Lester had made the wise suggestion that she should retain the clothes she had worn in Cleveland, in order that she might wear them home when she reached there. "There won't be any trouble about this other stuff," he said. "I'll have it cared for until we make some other arrangement." It was all very simple and easy. He was a master strategist. Jenny had written her mother almost daily since she had been East. She had enclosed little separate notes to be read by Mrs. Gerhardt only. In one, she explained Lester's desire to call and urged her mother to prepare the way by telling her father that she had met someone who liked her. She spoke of the difficulty concerning Vesta, and her mother at once began to plan a campaign to have Gerhardt hold his peace. There must be no hitch now. Jenny must be given an opportunity to better herself. When she returned, there was great rejoicing. Of course she could not go back to her work, but Mrs. Gerhardt explained that Mrs. Bracebridge had given Jenny a few weeks' vacation in order she might look for something better, something at which he could make more money. She could make more money. Chapter 24. The problem of the Gerhardt family and its relationship to himself comparatively settled. Cain betook himself to Cincinnati and to his business duties. He was heartily interested in the immense plant, which occupied 2 whole blocks in the outskirts of the city, and its conduct and development was as much a problem and a pleasure to him as to either his father or his brother. He liked to feel that he was a vital part of this great and growing industry. When he saw freight cars going by on the railroads labeled the Cain Manufacturing Company, Cincinnati, or chanced to notice displays of the company's products in the windows of carriage sales companies in the different cities, he was conscious of a warm glow of satisfaction. It was something to be a factor in an institution so stable, so distinguished, so honestly worthwhile. This was all very well, but now Cain was entering upon a new phase of his personal existence. In a word, there was Jenny. He was conscious as he rode toward his home city that he was entering on a relationship which might involve disagreeable consequences. He was a little afraid of his father's attitude. Above all, there was his brother, Robert. Robert was cold and conventional in character, an excellent businessman, irreproachable in both his public and in his private life, never overstepping the strict boundaries of legal righteousness. He was neither warm-hearted nor generous. In fact, he would turn any trick which could be speciously or at best necessitously recommended to his conscience. How he reasoned, Lester did not know. He could not follow the ramifications of a logic which could combine hard business tactics with moral rigidity, but somehow his brother managed to do it. He's got a Scotch Presbyterian conscience mixed with an Asiatic perception of the main chance. Lester once told somebody, and he had the situation accurately measured, Nevertheless, he could not rout his brother from his positions nor defy him, for he had the public conscience with him. He was in line with convention practically, and perhaps sophisticatedly. The two brothers were outwardly friendly. Inwardly, they were far apart. Robert liked Lester well enough personally, but he did not trust his financial judgment, and temperamentally, they did not agree as to how life and its affairs should be conducted. Lester had a secret contempt for his brother's chill, persistent chase of the almighty dollar. Robert was sure that Lester's easygoing ways were reprehensible and bound to create trouble sooner or later. In the business, they did not quarrel much. There was not so much chance with the old gentleman still in charge, but there were certain minor differences constantly cropping up which showed which way the wind blew. Lester was for building up trade through friendly relationship, concessions, personal contact, and favors. Robert was for pulling everything tight, cutting down the cost of production, and offering such financial inducements as would throttle competition. The old manufacturer always did his best to pour oil on these troubled waters, but he foresaw an eventual clash. One or the other would have to get out, or perhaps both. If only you two boys could agree, he used to say. Another thing which disturbed Lester was his father's attitude on the subject of marriage. Lester's marriage, to be specific. Archibald Cain never ceased to insist on the fact that Lester ought to get married and that he was making a big mistake in putting it off. All the other children, save Louise, were safely married. Why not his favorite son? It was doing him injury morally, socially, commercially, that he was sure of. The world expects it of a man in your position. His father had argued from time to time. It makes for social solidity and prestige. You ought to pick out a good woman and raise a family. Where will you be when you get to the time of my life if you haven't any children, any home? Well, if the right woman came along, said Lester, I suppose I'd marry her, but she hasn't come along. What do you want me to do? Take anybody? No, not anybody, of course, but there are lots of good women. You can surely find someone if you try. There's that Pace girl. What about her? You used to like her. I wouldn't drift on this way, Lester. It can't come to any good. His son would only smile. There, Father, let it go now. I'll come around sometime, no doubt. I've got to be thirsty when I'm led to water. The old gentleman gave over time and again, but it was a sore point with him. He wanted his son to settle down and be a real man of affairs. The fact that such a situation as this might militate against any permanent arrangement with Jennie was obvious, even to Lester at this time. He thought out his course of action carefully. Of course he would not give Jennie up, whatever the possible consequences. But he must be cautious. He must take no unnecessary risks. Could he bring her to Cincinnati? What a scandal if it were ever found out. Could he install her in a nice home somewhere near the city? The family would probably eventually suspect something. Could he take her along on his numerous business journeys? The first one to New York had been successful. Would it always be so? He turned the question over in his mind. The very difficulty gave it zest. Perhaps St. Louis or Pittsburgh or Chicago would be best after all. He went to these places frequently, and particularly to Chicago. He decided finally that it should be Chicago if he could arrange it. He could always make excuses to run up there, and it was only a night's ride. Yeah, Chicago was best. The very size and activity of the city made concealment easy. After 2 weeks' stay at Cincinnati, Lester wrote Jennie that he was coming to Cleveland soon, and she answered that she thought it would be all right for him to call and see her. Her father had been told about him. She felt it unwise to stay about the house, and so had secured a position in a store at $4 a week. He smiled as he thought of her working, and yet the decency and energy of it appealed to him. She's all right, he said. She's the best I've come across yet. He ran up to Cleveland the following Saturday, and calling at her place of business, he made an appointment to see her that evening. He was anxious that his introduction as her beau should be gotten over with as quickly as possible. When he did call, the shabbiness of the house and the manifest poverty of the family rather disgusted him. But somehow Jennie seemed as sweet to him as ever. Gerhardt came in the front room, after he had been there for a few minutes, and shook hands with him, as did also Mrs. Gerhardt. But Lester paid little attention to them. The old German appeared to him to be merely commonplace, the sort of man who was hired by hundreds in common capacities in his father's factory. After some desultory conversation, Lester suggested to Jennie that they should go for a drive. Jennie put on her hat, and together they departed. As a matter of fact, they went to an apartment which he had hired for the storage of her clothes. When she returned at 8 in the evening, the family considered it nothing amiss. Chapter 25. A month later, Jennie was able to announce that Lester intended to marry her. His visits had of course paved the way for this, and it seemed natural enough. Only Gerhardt seemed a little doubtful. He did not know just how this might be. Perhaps it was all right. Lester seemed a fine enough man in all conscience, and really, after Brander, why not? If a United States senator could fall in love with Jennie, why not a businessman? There was just one thing. The child. Has she told him about Vesta? He asked his wife. No, said Mrs. Gerhardt, not yet. Not yet, not yet. Always something underhanded. Do you think he wants her if he knows? That's what comes of such conduct in the first place. Now she has to slip around like a thief. The child cannot even have an honest name. Gerhardt went back to his newspaper, reading and brooding. His life seemed a complete failure to him, and he was only waiting to get well enough to hunt up another job as a watchman. He wanted to get out of this mess of deception and dishonesty. A week or two later, Jennie confided to her mother that Lester had written her to join him in Chicago. He was not feeling well and could not come to Cleveland. The two women explained to Gerhardt that Jennie was going away to be married to Mr. Kane. Gerhardt flared up at this, and his suspicions were again aroused, but he could do nothing but grumble over the situation. It would lead to no good end, of that he was sure. When the day came for Jennie's departure, she had to go without saying farewell to her father. He was out looking for work until late in the afternoon, and before he had returned, she had been obliged to leave for the station. I will write a note to him when I get there, she said. She kissed her baby over and over. Lester will take a better house for us soon, she went on hopefully. He wants us to move. The night train bore her to Chicago. The old life had ended and the new one had begun. The curious fact should be recorded here that although Lester's generosity had relieved the stress upon the family finances, the children and Gerhardt were actually none the wiser. It was easy for Mrs. Gerhardt to deceive her husband as to the purchase of necessities, and she had not as yet indulged in any of the fancies which an enlarged purse permitted. Fear deterred her, but after Jennie had been in Chicago for a few days, she wrote to her mother saying that Lester wanted them to take a new home. This letter was shown to Gerhardt, who had been merely biding her return to make a scene. He frowned. But somehow it seemed an evidence of regularity. If he had not married her, why should he want to help them? Perhaps Jennie was well married after all. Perhaps she really had been lifted to a high station in life and was now able to help the family. Gerhardt almost concluded to forgive her everything once and for all. The end of it was that a new house was decided upon, and Jennie returned to Cleveland to help her mother move. Together, they searched the streets for a nice, quiet neighborhood and finally found one. A house of 9 rooms with a yard, which rented for $30, was secured and suitably furnished. There were comfortable fittings for the dining room and sitting room, a handsome parlor set, and bedroom sets complete for each room. The kitchen was supplied with every convenience, and there was even a bathroom, a luxury the Gerhardts had never enjoyed before. Altogether, the house was attractive, though plain, and Jennie was happy to know that her family could be comfortable in it. When the time came for the actual moving, Mrs. Gerhardt was fairly beside herself with joy, for was not this the realization of her dreams? All through the long years of her life she had been waiting, and now it had come. A new house, new furniture, plenty of room, things finer than she had ever even imagined. Think of it! Her eyes shone as she looked at the new beds and tables and bureaus and whatnots. Dear, dear, isn't this nice? She exclaimed. Isn't it beautiful? Jennie smiled and tried to pretend satisfaction without emotion, but there were tears in her eyes. She was so glad for her mother's sake. She could have kissed Lester's feet for his goodness to her family. The day the furniture was moved in, Mrs. Gerhardt, Martha, and Veronica were on hand to clean and arrange things. At the sight of the large rooms and pretty yard, bare enough in the winter, but giving promise of a delightful greenness in spring, and the array of new furniture standing about in excelsior, the whole family fell into a fever of delight. Such beauty, such spaciousness. George rubbed his feet over the new carpets, and Bass examined the quality of the furniture critically. Swell, was his comment. Mrs. Gerhardt roved to and fro like a person in a dream. She could not believe that these bright bedrooms, this beautiful parlor, this handsome dining room were actually hers. Gerhard came last of all. Although he tried hard not to show it, he too could scarcely refrain from enthusiastic comment. The sight of an opal-globed chandelier over the dining room table was the finishing touch. Gas yet, he said. He looked grimly around under his shaggy eyebrows at the new carpets under his feet. The long oak extension table covered with a white cloth and set with new dishes, at the pictures on the walls, the bright, clean kitchen. He shook his head. By chops, it's fine, he said. It's very nice. Yes, it's very nice. We want to be careful now not to break anything. It's so easy to scratch things up and then it's all over. Yes, even Gerhardt was satisfied. Chapter 26. It would be useless to chronicle the events of the 3 years that followed. Events and experiences by which the family grew from an abject condition of want to a state of comparative self-reliance, based, of course, on the obvious prosperity of Jennie and the generosity, through her, of her distant husband. Lester was seen now and then, a significant figure visiting Cleveland, and sometimes coming out of the house where he occupied with Jennie the 2 best rooms of the second floor. There were hurried trips on her part, in answer to telegraph messages, to Chicago, to St. Louis, to New York. One of his favorite pastimes was to engage quarters at the great resorts, Hot Springs, Mount Clemens, Saratoga, and for a period of a week or 2, at a stretch, enjoy the luxury of living with Jennie as his wife. There were other times when he would pass through Cleveland only for the privilege of seeing her for a day. All the time he was aware that he was throwing on her the real burden of a rather difficult situation, but he did not see how he could remedy it at this time. He was not sure as yet that he really wanted to. They were getting along fairly well. The attitude of the Gerhardt family toward this condition of affairs was peculiar. At first, in spite of the irregularity of it, it seemed natural enough. Jennie said she was married. No one had seen her marriage certificate, but she said so, and she seemed to carry herself with the air of one who holds that relationship. Still, she never went to Cincinnati, where his family lived, and none of his relatives ever came near her. Then, too, his attitude. In spite of the money which had first blinded them was peculiar. He really did not carry himself like a married man. He was so indifferent. There were weeks in which she appeared to receive only perfunctory notes. There were times when she would only go away for a few days to meet him. Then there were the long periods in which she absented herself, the only worthwhile testimony toward a real relationship, and that, in a way, unnatural. Bass, who had grown to be a young man of 25, with some business judgment and a desire to get out in the world, was suspicious. He had come to have a pretty keen knowledge of life, and intuitively he felt that things were not right. George, 19, who had gained a slight foothold in a wallpaper factory and was looking forward to a career in that field, was also restless. He felt that something was wrong. Martha, 17, was still in school, as were William and Veronica. Each was offered an opportunity to study indefinitely, but there was unrest with life. They knew about Jennie's child. The neighbors were obviously drawing conclusions for themselves. They had few friends. Gerhardt himself finally concluded that there was something wrong, but he had let himself into this situation and was not in much of a position now to raise an argument. He wanted to ask her at times, proposed to make her do better if he could, but the worst had already been done. It depended on the man now. He knew that. Things were gradually nearing a state where a general upheaval would have taken place had not life stepped in with one of its fortuitous solutions. Mrs. Gerhardt's health failed. Although stout and formerly of a fairly active disposition, she had of late years become decidedly sedentary in her habits and grown weak, which, coupled with a mind naturally given to worry and weighed upon, as it had been, by a number of serious and disturbing ills, seemed now to culminate in a slow but very certain case of systemic poisoning. She became decidedly sluggish in her motions, wearied more quickly at the few tasks left for her to do, and finally complained to Jennie that it was very hard for her to climb stairs. "I'm not feeling well," she said. "I think I'm going to be sick." Jennie now took alarm and proposed to take her to some nearby watering place, but Mrs. Gerhardt wouldn't go. "I don't think it would do any good," she said. She sat about or went driving with her daughter, but the fading autumn scenery depressed her. "I don't like to get sick in the fall," she said. "The leaves coming down make me think I'm never going to get well." "Oh, Ma, how you talk," said Jennie. But she felt frightened, nevertheless. How much the average home depends upon the mother was seen when it was feared the end was near. Bass, who had thought of getting married and getting out of this atmosphere, abandoned the idea temporarily. Gerhardt, shocked and greatly depressed, hung about like one expectant of and greatly awed by the possibility of disaster. Jennie, too, inexperienced in death to feel that she could possibly lose her mother, felt as if somehow her living depended on her. Hoping in spite of all opposing circumstances, she hung about, a white figure of patience, waiting and serving. The end came one morning after a month of illness and several days of unconsciousness, during which silence reigned in the house and all the family went about on tiptoe. Mrs. Gerhardt passed away with her dying gaze fastened on Jennie's face for the last few minutes of consciousness that life vouchsafed her. Jesus. Jennie stared into her eyes with a yearning horror. "Mama, Mama," she cried, "no." Gerhardt came running in from the yard, and throwing himself down by the bedside, wrung his bony hands in anguish. "I should have gone first," he cried. "I should have gone first." The death of Mrs. Gerhardt hastened the final breaking up of the family. Bass was bent on getting married at once, having had a girl in town for some time. Martha, whose views of life had broadened and hardened, was anxious to get out also. She felt that a sort of stigma attached to the home, to herself, in fact, so long as she remained there. Martha looked to the public schools as a source of income. She was going to be a teacher. Gerhardt alone scarcely knew which way to turn. He was again at work as a night watchman. Jennie found him crying one day alone in the kitchen and immediately burst into tears herself. "Now, Papa," she pleaded, "it isn't as bad as that. You will always have a home, you know that, as long as I have anything. You can come with me." "No, no," he protested. He really did not want to go with her. "It isn't that," he continued. "My whole life comes to nothing." It was some little time before Bess, George, and Martha finally left, but one by one they got out, leaving Jennie, her father, Veronica, and William, and one other, Jennie's child. Of course, Lester knew nothing of Vesta's parentage, and curiously enough, he had never seen the little girl. During the short periods in which he deigned to visit the house, 2 or 3 days at most, Mrs. Gerhardt took good care that Vesta was kept in the background. There was a playroom on the top floor, and also a bedroom there, and concealment was easy. Lester rarely left his rooms, he even had his meals served to him in what might have been called the living room of the suite. He was not at all inquisitive or anxious to meet any one of the other members of the family. He was perfectly willing to shake hands with them or to exchange a few perfunctory words, but perfunctory words only. It was generally understood that the child must not appear, and so it did not. There is an inexplicable sympathy between old age and childhood, an affinity which is as lovely as it is pathetic. During that first year in Laurie Street, when no one was looking, Gerhardt often carried Vesta about on his shoulders and pinched her soft red cheeks. When she got old enough to walk, it was who, with a towel fastened securely under her arms, led her patiently around the room until she was able to take a few steps of her own accord. When she actually reached the point where she could walk, he was the one who coaxed her to the effort, shyly, grimly, but always lovingly. By some strange leading of fate, this stigma on his family's honor, this blotch on conventional morality, had twined its helpless baby fingers about the tendons of his heart. He loved this little outcast ardently, hopefully. She was the one bright ray in a narrow, gloomy life, and Gerhardt early took upon himself the responsibility of her education in religious matters. Was it not he who had insisted that the infant should be baptized? "Say, Our Father," he used to demand of the lisping infant when he had her alone with him. "Our Father," was her vowel-like interpretation of his words. "Who art in heaven, who art in heaven," repeated the child. "Why do you teach her so early?" pleaded Mrs. Gerhardt, overhearing the little one's struggles with stubborn consonants and vowels. "Because I want she should learn the Christian faith," returned Gerhardt determinedly. "She ought to know her prayers. If she don't begin now, she will never know them." Mrs. Gerhardt smiled. Many of her husband's religious idiosyncrasies were amusing to her. At the same time, she liked to see the sympathetic interest he was taking in the child's upbringing. If he were only not so hard, so narrow at times, he made himself a torment to himself and to everyone else. On the earliest bright morning of returning spring, he was wont to take her for her first little journeys in the world. "Come now," he would say, "we will go for a little walk." "Walk," chirped Vesta. "Yes, walk," echoed Gerhardt. Mrs. Gerhardt would fasten on one of her little hoods, For in these days Jennie kept Vesta's wardrobe beautifully replete. Taking her by the hand, Gerhardt would issue forth, satisfied to drag first one foot and then the other in order to accommodate his gait to her toddling steps. One beautiful May day when Vesta was 4 years old, they started on one of their walks. Everywhere nature was budding and burgeoning, the birds twittering their arrival from the south, the insects making the best of their brief span of life. Sparrows chirped in the road. Robins strutted upon the grass. Bluebirds built in the eaves of the cottages. Gerhardt took a keen delight in pointing out the wonders of nature to Vesta, and she was quick to respond. Every new sight and sound interested her. "Ooh, ooh!" exclaimed Vesta, catching sight of a low, flashing touch of red as a robin lighted upon a twig nearby. Her hand was up, and her eyes were wide open. "Yes," said Gerhardt, as happy as if he himself had but newly discovered this marvelous creature. "Robin. Bird. Robin. Say robin. Wobbin," said Vesta. "Yes, robin," he answered. "It is going to look for a worm now. We will see if it cannot find its nest. I think I saw a nest in one of these trees." He plodded peacefully on, seeking to rediscover an old abandoned nest that he had observed on a former walk. "Here it is," he said at last, coming to a small and leafless tree in which a winter-beaten remnant of a home was still clinging. "Here, come now, see." And he lifted the baby up at arm's length. "See," said Gerhardt, indicating the wisp of dead grasses with his free hand. "Nest! That is a bird's nest, see?" "Ooh!" repeated Vesta, imitating his pointing finger with one of her own. "Nest! Ooh!" "Yes," said Gerhardt, putting her down again. "That was a wren's nest. They have all gone now. They will not come any more." Still further they plodded, he unfolding the simple facts of life, she wondering with the wide wonder of a child. When they had gone a block or two, he turned slowly about as if the end of the world had been reached. "We must be going back," he said. And so she had come to her 5th year, growing in sweetness, intelligence, and vivacity. Gerhardt was fascinated by the questions she asked, the puzzles she pronounced. "Such a girl," he would exclaim to his wife. "What is it she doesn't want to know? Where is God? What does he do? Where does he keep his feet?" she asks me. I gotta laugh sometimes. From rising in the morning to dress her to laying her down at night after she had said her prayers, she came to be the chief solace and comfort of his days. Without Vesta, Gerhardt would have found his life hard indeed to bear.